Zane. We're here at Warner Brothers. We're about to see The Hobbit.
In 48
frames
per second, 3D.
3D. Get ready.
Ooh, the camera. Oh, Mike, stop it. My foot like down. Very bad.
Andrew's so scared.
I'm not going to check that. The mini boy.
They got to Rivendell, I was like,
And really?
totally in.
I kind of fell asleep almost for that.
You could read everything that happens in this movie that happens in the book. You could read up to the point that this movie ends in about 2 hours before you go see the movie. Yeah.
This is Ryan, Jimmy, and Andrew here to review The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, Part 1 of the Hobbit trilogy. We saw it in 48 frames 3D. We're going to post a separate video to talk about the 48 frames. Here we are going to be talking about the film itself. We're going to put a spoiler alert right now. We're going to be talking about the movie pretty in depth.
I'm going to say this at the risk of literally blowing people's heads up. I have not seen a single one of the Lord of the Rings movies.
So that's good. You kind of have an outsider's perspective.
So,
Yeah,
there's
so
still
we're
those
starting
people.
from the beginning.
I'm really
Yeah.
starting from scratch.
This
here.
is really the beginning of the
And
journey.
Jimmy has said that
And
he will
Jimmy
not
decided.
watch The Lord of the Rings until he's seen all three Hobbits.
I'm going to wait.
I like to poke fun at Lord of the Rings. Watching this movie, and I've always kind of known this, I really do love the Lord of the Rings movies. It doesn't really go beyond that. I didn't read the books or anything, but I really do love the movies. Watching this movie reminded me how much I love the world that they've kind of created from Tolkien's world and what Peter Jackson has done with it.
I really love the Hobbit book. I grew up with it. I grew up with the Lord of the Rings books. I like Lord of the Rings a lot, but I really love the Hobbit book. And part of the reason I love the Hobbit book so much is that its brevity is such a huge chunk of its charm. One of the things that I nitpick with filmmakers about is I want to see them grow. In the years I have in a relationship with a filmmaker with their movies, I want to experience them growing. And I think he's getting worse as a filmmaker. I think he's getting too full of... He's the kind of guy who just, everything I film is genius, and I want to cram as much of it as I can. There's no reason this movie should be one part of three, films, a trilogy.
He's like a huge budget Judd Apatow. In, the way that Judd Apatow people always complain, he's too in love with his characters. He enjoys too much watching his characters that, the movie suffers. And I think that this kind of happens that.
The prologue, they have this epic
that
battle that was just so awesome. And then it went into, song and dance and cheesy crap.
The Hobbit book starts off with, these are hobbits, this is Bilbo. He's, they're all supposed to be nice and proper and everything, but he's got a little toque inside of him because that's his bloodline, and they're a little rebellious, but he doesn't show it that much. And all these dwarves just start knocking on his door and blah, blah, blah. And he's just trying to catch up, and the story moves so swiftly, and Bilbo's just trying to catch up. It makes him the perfect surrogate for the audience and for the reader because they're grabbing on too, and they want to catch up with this world. With this prologue, which talks about the history of the dwarves, and it talks about the history of Thorin, the main dwarf, as the leader and everything. It shifts the focus, and by the time all the hobbits or all the dwarves get to his residence, Bilbo's place, all of that goes out the window, and you're suddenly now annoyed with Bilbo because you're 10 steps ahead of him. You know the dynamics, you know the ranking order of all these guys, you know everything about these guys, and Bilbo doesn't know anything. It takes him away from being the protagonist of the movie. It steals him from being the surrogate for us, and therefore it's not for another, like you said, another 40 minutes into the movie that the sheer power of Martin Freeman's charisma.
And it should be said,
endears you to
Martin
the character.
Freeman is great.
Amazing.
Yeah, he runs away with the show. He is amazing.
Absolutely perfect. He's charming. He's endearing. He's bumbling in the way that Martin Freeman has made kind of famous for that kind of character in England and things like that.
You can't help but fall in love.
And he's great. About 45 minutes in, they arrive in Rivendell. That, for me, is the moment that the movie took off.
Is it because you're in love with Cate Blanchett?
It's not because I'm in love with Cate Blanchett, although she looks great in this movie.
I actually really didn't like the scene in Rivendell because I feel like it was too reverential of what they did.
Even though Cate Blanchett was there,
I'm in love. I love Cate Blanchett as much as the next guy, and I love Christopher Lee as much as the next guy. But it slowed the forward momentum. Same with Radagast. I'm a Doctor Who fan.
Huge pump of the brakes.
Yeah, exactly. And when Radagast comes in, it's right when they're all like, yes, we have to go on this adventure. It's going to be this thing. And then they stick with Radagast for like a 25-minute scene that literally goes nowhere.
That's to me when I got sucked into the world again. I felt like I knew exactly where we were.
Is that because of your goodwill with Lord of the Rings?
It may be.
Yeah. He should have treated this as a different animal. That's why I was so excited with the idea of Guillermo del Toro directing this, because it genuinely would have been a different animal from the Lord of the Rings.
No,
it wants to do two things. It wants to tell a smaller story.
He has to make sure that this doesn't feel like it's a departure from what we've seen of Middle Earth.
That being said, though, tonally,
that was
this movie is different.
I would argue that the first half of this movie, prologue notwithstanding, is lighter. And then I think once they get to the goblins, it's at the same tone as Fellowship, which is a problem because the stakes with Fellowship
I think it was funnier. I think it was funnier and lighter.
Really, by the end of it,
if you look at the scene in the Goblin Caves in this, and you play it to the Mines of Moria scene in Fellowship of the Ring,
yeah, the stakes feel higher, but
way higher in Lord of the Rings. From when they arrive in the caves of the mines in this movie, like to when they leave, is fantastic.
Yeah, that's a great set piece.
It includes a set piece of them escaping the goblins that is possibly the most fun I've had at the movies this year watching it. It's so inventive and so much fun. And it also has, which we will get to, the scene with Gollum. It's 20 minutes in the middle of the movie that's an absolute masterwork. I think it's the perfect marriage of CGI and live action and just fantastic writing with amazing performances. Like, not to oversell it, but I think it's really, like, I was riveted the whole time, and it's completely unbroken.
Yeah, it's my favorite set piece of the movie.
It's my favorite part of the movie, too.
That's incredible, isn't it? That your favorite set piece of a movie that's this big is two people talking
two people with a game of riddles. It was my favorite scene in the book.
Right, and that's also, it's kind of like, that's what he should try to do. He should try to tell these smaller stories, but it's kind of hard for him. I think maybe that's why they stand out, too, also, is because the Gollum sequence is the perfect example of how to get everything right, and that's why I think it's so frustrating how this movie has segments like this where it's just your jaw's at the floor, you're awestruck, and then there's other parts that just feel really unfinished and kind of rushed and cobbled together. And I know you guys are in love with the Goblin Mine, but there are a lot lot shots that we're using a virtual.
We're not in love.
No, but I'm saying
pump the brakes. I'm not that committal.
I'm just putting it in context of my emotions about it. You feel like you're in love with it.
Yeah.
But for me, there are a lot of virtual camera shots in there that really felt like just totally out of place.
I will say
shots that were going back and forth because the set is really long, and I thought it was really fun. It's really inventive. It is inventive. There are parts of it, like when the things are swinging, it's like almost like taking the best parts of your favorite platformer video game and putting it into a set piece.
People say like, oh, he's gonna go back and change the Hobbit, like in this 3-movie structure, to follow more in line with the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Well, Tolkien
did the exact same thing with the Game of Riddles. Yeah, after the Game of Riddles and the original thing, it was completely different. He went back and changed it after he released Lord of the Rings, the books, to make Gollum and the Ring more.
Yeah,
do you think that people in that time reacted, at that time, I say like
the way us fanboys react
the way people are like, I can't believe they put Hayden Christensen in at the end of Jedi?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think it was like that for people?
One other thing I want to say I really liked, the look of the dwarves. It's to get 13 dwarves and to give them each individual personalities. Yeah. There are 2 or 3 dwarves that don't even say anything in this movie, which is annoying. Like, you can't come into this expecting to get to know every one of them the same way you got to know everybody in the Fellowship. It's not that kind of story.
They even acknowledge that in the movie. Like, Gandalf isn't like, where's Boffin? He's like 1, 2, 3, 4.
He's
like
counting,
he's literally just counting off the words. The Pixar guys talk about something called shape language that they always play around with, and that's how I felt with this.
Like their silhouette. Going back into some things I didn't care about. When Radagast comes in, it's like right when they're all like, yes, we have to go on this adventure. It's going to be this thing. And then they stick with Radagast for like a 25-minute scene that literally goes nowhere.
I don't really like the character very much. He looks like he got crapped on by a bird, which he did. He has just bird shit all over his face. It's really annoying. Because he's a wizard. You would think that he could just magically clean himself.
But he's the one who's in tune with nature.
He's in tune with nature, and I'm all for that.
He could like Cleanicus.
But I enjoyed his.
It's a Harry Potter thing.
I enjoyed the quirkiness of the character. The CGI felt the least blended and photoreal, and it is at apart when you're just getting adjusted to the 48 frames.
Yeah.
And right when I felt like fully adjusted,
you were pulled out.
It was like 40 minutes in, and it's like, boom, this looks like crap.
Can I say something about the CGI there for a second? This is a note to all filmmakers out there. The shot of someone riding a vehicle where you're shooting up and they're just doing this never works. It still doesn't work. Don't do it anymore. Please. It's amazing that in a movie like this that costs like $200 million, that a guy riding a sled still looks terrible.
Yeah. The two worst things for me in the movie is Radagast and the main antagonist, this great orc that is Kratos from God of War. I mean, it is uncanny the amount of resemblance. They were probably like, oh shit, we got another guy to make. Like, what does he got to look like?
It's not even his resemblance to the God of War character. It's more that he feels like a video game villain.
It does feel like a video game.
It's very odd because everything else looks, all the CGI looks so great.
Yeah,
but he's also, like, it's really weird because he's the most
smooth and weird.
He's the most bland character.
He really
both
is.
In terms of his motion, his color palette is just white, and it almost feels like there's no texture to his skin. It's very odd.
He looks like old school.
He looks very
smooth.
unfinished.
Yeah, they reused the theme in Lord of the Rings of the Nazgul. You know, the 9 riders, and I wanted to shoot the screen. I was so angry because for somebody like Jimmy, who's gonna watch it.
It'll be a different experience for him.
Well, it will be diminished by the time he gets to Lord of the Rings, and by the time they lay out those high stakes in Fellowship, and they play that music, it's like, oh, I saw that when that dude was fighting those dwarves.
It's creating archetypes within its own world.
Exactly, and it's making by those archetypes by limiting the amount of archetypes. This is a bad person
theme, and this is a good person.
Exactly, and that's making the universe smaller because there's not just the good guys and bad guys.
You do not get a good look at the dragon. So if you're going to this film hoping to
if you hate hobbits but you love dragons,
you're gonna be,
you won't like this movie.
Bummed.
Just to wrap it up, do you think that this is going to pump you for the next film the same way that Fellowship would pump you for Two Towers, that the Two Towers would pump you for Return of the King?
Yeah, I'm more excited to see the next film than I was to see this one.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a line at the end of this movie.
I can also say the exact same thing because I was not very excited to see this movie. And having seen it, now I'm going, well, great. Now I have to see the next.
There's a line at the end of the movie where Bilbo turns to Gandalf and he says, I truly think the worst is behind us. And I was like, I hope you're right. I hope you are right.
I don't think they can drag their feet as much as this one did at the beginning of getting that ball rolling.
I mean,
and I realized when you realize in the sense of 9 hours of film, 40 minutes is nothing.
Having read the book, they don't have that. They don't have 2 movies. They hardly have a movie left to get through.
We'll see next Christmas when The Desolation of Smaug comes out. I really enjoyed myself. I left skipping out of the theater. Jimmy?
Indifferent, was never bored, was never truly going, yeah, but there are some amazing set pieces that I will never forget. Most notably Gollum.
Mm-hmm. There are a few set pieces I like. Aside from that, I thought it was a cynical movie. Just a very unnecessary film. Should have been one movie.
I would have loved it as one movie. Would have loved it as one movie.
Would have been better.
As soon as you see The Hobbit, first thing you do, get something to eat, probably go to the bathroom, because you'll be hungry and you'll have to pee, and then come and comment below and let us know what you think. We will be commenting back because we want to know. So, please join us for our 48 frames per second conversation, which will be happening shortly. And until then, I'm Ryan.
I'm Jimmy.
I'm Andrew.
Thank you for watching us.